Deion Sanders is confident that Colorado can make it to the college football playoff, but I think there are three major challenges that could prevent them from having their dream season.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I am your host, Kevin Boulder. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. We are also brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day for free and available wherever you may get your podcasts. So make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and all that jazz. We're talking about the three biggest challenges for Colorado because I think they could compete. I think they could be a lot better than most people realize. Their win total's at 5.5. I think realistically, they're sitting in that somewhere to 7 to 8 win range. And if things shake their way down the stretch, maybe they're making a late push for the Big 12 title. Who knows? But there are three things that stand out to me where it's like, if they don't fix this from last season, or if they don't address this even more, they will struggle. Starting with their run defense. I've talked about this on multiple episodes, but Colorado had one of the worst run defenses in all of college football last season. And they also have one of the toughest or most run-heavy schedules this season. So if you look at who they play, North Dakota State, they love to run the ball. That's going to be a tough game to open the season. It'll be a frisky game. I think Colorado wins, obviously, but I think that North Dakota State is going to try to push Colorado to their limit. Nebraska, most of the success they had against Colorado last year, which there wasn't much, was when they ran the ball. It wasn't when they were throwing it, it was when they were running it. Baylor, also physical team. UCF has probably or arguably one of the most dynamic quarterback and running back duos in the Big 12 in terms of running. Kansas State, they have a really talented quarterback who could scoot with the best of them. Arizona had a really good running back last year. Texas Tech, Taj Brooks, really good. Utah, Micah Bernard, Jalen Glover. They added Anthony Woods, a transfer from Idaho. They have a lot of running backs. Kansas, they have Devin Neal, who is probably one of the most underrated running backs in college football. And then to conclude the year, they get to take on Ollie Gordon, who is probably the best running back in college football. So if Colorado has struggles stopping the run, other teams are just going to run it down their throats. And how does this affect them? Well, if Colorado can't stop the run, one, it's going to make their defense tired because they're constantly going to be battered and bruised, just trying to bring down these bruising running backs. But it also keeps the ball out of Shedor's hands. And you don't want the ball out of Shedor Sanders' hands as much as you can. Like, you obviously want to have a balanced offense, which I'll talk about pretty quick here, but you don't want the other team to have the ball for, say, 7 minutes at a time, 10 minutes at a time, and Shedor's just sitting on the bench watching because your defense can't stop the run. Now, I've talked about this before, and I'll talk about it again. I realistically think that if Colorado could stop the run, they will be a much better team than they were last year. But I think in order to do that, on top of bolstering their defense line, which they did, they added Chidozie Nwankwo, who I talked about yesterday as one of my underrated guys. They added Quincy Wiggins. They added Anquin Barnes. They added some big bodies, and Amari McNeil's running it back. Their linebackers worry me, and I don't think we currently know who their starting linebackers would be. I think outside of Levante Bentley and possibly Trevor Woods, who I know isn't the biggest fan favorite, but Coach Prime clearly likes him and clearly likes what he brings to the table. I don't think they have the pieces that they need at linebacker to really slow down the run as much as they'll need to. Second thing that I think, or a second challenge that I see as a possible thorn in the side for Colorado is not having a balanced offense. I think last year they didn't have a balanced offense out of necessity. I know a lot of people are riding that narrative where it's like, you know what? Colorado, Coach Prime, they're not going to win games because Coach Prime wants Shedor to win the Heisman. He wants Shedor to boost his draft stock. He wants Shedor to be the best player ever. And I think realistically, does Coach Prime or does Deion Sanders as a father want his son and sons to be the best players that they could be? Yes. Is he going to handicap or take out, give his own team an Achilles heel simply because he wants his son to be the best? No. I think people who say that are kind of showing that they're not the biggest fans of Coach Prime, because if you look at Jackson State's stats from, I guess it would be 2022, they realistically were running the ball. They had a balanced attack, And Coach Prime wants to run the ball. I think that's kind of the misconception about his team is that they don't want to run the ball. But you look at their roster, and I'll just kind of bring up the stats right here. They had, excuse me, especially one Mr. Stevion Wilkerson was a baller for them. He was a do it all type of guy. And I don't think people were kind of considering that. I think a lot of the times when you think of the Coach Prime experience, we saw, oh yeah, Shador Sanders is going to throw the ball a bunch of times, and we're not going to be able to see the running back. And I don't think Coach Prime brings in their running backs. When they went 12-1, their average yards per game were 271. So they that means that they were running the ball when needed. It also kind of means that people are pushing this narrative that's not really there to push. And so I think that's something to look at as well. So I'm pulling up the stats right now. In 2022, Colorado, obviously, Shador threw for 480 attempts, 3,700 yards, 40 touchdowns, 6 picks. Stevion Wilkerson had 226 carries for 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns, which, I mean, good for him. Next running back had 56 carries for 359 yards. If you look at Colorado's stats from this past season, they did not run the ball as much because they obviously were limited by their they're probably limited by their defense. They were limited by the offensive line in a sense that they were not able to run the ball. So, Stevion Wilkerson at Jackson State, 226 carries. Colorado as a team this past season had 358 carries, which 111 of them were Shador Sanders running or counted as Shador Sanders running the ball. Their leading rusher had 76 carries. So obviously, I think a balanced rushing attack is in their future. I think they needed an offense line, and I think they needed kind of a running back mix that worked out for them. Dylan Edwards mixed with Anthony Hankerson wasn't really the equation that they were missing. At running back, I think Alton McCaskill will kind of bring that group together because you throw out Alton McCaskill as like an every down back. You plug in Dylan Edwards, who's a speedy guy. And then you got Michael Welch, the freshman, who could come in and do a little bit of everything. So I think they have a more balanced running back room, and I think they have a much better offensive line that sets them up to run the ball better. And then the third biggest challenge, and this is more of a mental thing. This isn't a football thing. I mean, it technically is, I guess, but very much a mental thing. How they handle adversity. I look at their schedule, and I've talked about it multiple times, and I'm like, you know what? I could see them starting 5-0. I could see them beating North Dakota State, Nebraska, Colorado State, Baylor, and UCF. But then they have a bye week, and then they have and this is current rankings or based off how the season ended, I believe. Number 20, Kansas State, at number 11, Arizona. Tough matchups. Cincinnati should be able to beat them. At Texas Tech, should be a good team. Then they go number 10, Utah, at 22, Kansas, and then number 17, Oklahoma State. If they start 5-0 and then they lose a few games, say they lose 3 games in a row, say they lose to Kansas State, Arizona, and Cincinnati, are they going to be able to bounce back? Are they going to be able to kind of not let history repeat itself? Last season, they started off hot, 3-0. They lose to Oregon. They get blown out, and it's like, okay, Oregon's one of the best teams in the country. They go toe-to-toe with USC, and it's like, okay, progress. They beat Arizona State. It was ugly, but it was a win. So they're 4-3 at this point, or 4-2 at this point. 4-3? Who am I missing? I feel like I'm missing someone. Either way, they get to that Stanford game, and I kid you not, they blow a 29-point lead. Coach Prime in the locker room at the end of the game was like, get ready for all that social media love for you guys to flip because that's not going to happen anymore. And the team collapsed. That was, I think, the defining moment of the season because everything that could go wrong went wrong. The offense lost its luster. The defense couldn't stop anything. The coaches, they were messing up left and right. They had illegal substitutions. They had discipline issues with the players. They had players yelling at Deion Sanders, Coach Prime on the sideline, screaming at him. And I think that was just the turning point of the season. It's the 12-game season. Realistically, everyone wants to play for the playoff in the conference title, the Big 12 title. Not everyone is. If you get to a point where it's like, you know what, we've lost 3 straight and we've already won 5 games. It's tough, not ideal. You're probably not in the Big 12 picture when you start out one. That would make them 2-3 in Big 12 play. That would probably not be the best way to start. I'd probably say I would go out on a limb and say they're not going to be in Big 12 contention if they start the year 2-3 in Big 12 play. But a bowl game is still at hand. You win one more game, assuming you start 5-0 or whatever. You start 4-1. You win one or two more games, you're in a bowl game, and that's much better than where you've been. And so I think the way they handle adversity will kind of determine their season, because if they're unable to handle adversity, it shows that this team, I won't say it's a culture problem, but they have a toughness problem. They have a mental toughness problem. And you don't want to have a mental toughness problem, because that realistically shows that you're just a group of guys that aren't built for enduring the challenges that are ahead. And so I think those are my three biggest challenges for Colorado in 2024. You comment below what you think the biggest challenge for this team will be next season. We'll digress in the comment section. When we come back, there's another rumor about Coach Prime leaving. Which school is he going to? Which school is the favorite? I'm going to shoot those down because I don't think he's going anywhere when we come back. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by our sponsors over at Game Time. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And right now, all users get $100 off when they buy a big game ticket with the code Vegas100. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You won't be sitting behind a pole. You won't be sitting behind a weird little corner spot where you can't see the game. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Right now, all Game Time users get $100 off a big time ticket with code Vegas100. That's VEGAS 100. Terms apply. Just download the Game Time app and use code Vegas100 for $100 off a big time or a big game ticket. Or if you're not going to the game, use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to Locked On Buffs. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. So tune in. I want to thank you guys for tuning in, though, and subscribing, because we're getting there. We're almost at 5,000. We're flying up the rankings. Okay. Coach Prime leaving Colorado. It's like the common subject. We always got to talk about it because there's always rumors about it. And recently, the odds makers over at Colorado Bet, or I think that's what they were called. Let's just give me a quick Google. They released the odds for whoever this place is. They released the odds for where they think Coach Prime will be coaching next, and obviously Bet Colorado. Excuse me. They obviously, like I said, released odds for where he'll be next, and so this is under the assumption that he does well. Which, I mean, if you're a Colorado fan, you have to love. And this is under the assumption that prominent jobs will open, and this is where he would be headed. And so the favorite, which is, this is how I know like this place is probably inaccurate. We're going to discuss it, but for one, let me just get this out of the way. Unless there is a job in his home state of Florida that opens and it is a job that he likes or is interested in, I don't think he goes anywhere for like another, say, SEC job or Big Ten job. I just don't. I think he likes Colorado. They don't have booster controls like they do at these other programs. Realistically, they don't have, and this isn't to say that he doesn't want to succeed, but they don't have these high expectations where it's like, you need to win a championship by year 4 or you're done. He doesn't have to deal with that. The fan base supports him, and he's kind of cornering the market, if you will, on this side of the map. Realistically, right now, I would say the Big 12 is very much up for grabs. There's not a face of the conference, and I think Coach Prime could very well be the face of the conference. I think the Pac-12, it was Oregon, it was Washington, it was USC, it was Stanford when they were good, and Colorado was just never that team. I think the Big 12, with him, they could be that team. Does he want to move again? He said he moved all of his family out to Boulder. Does he want to move them all again? So I don't think he's going anywhere, but these are the teams that they think he could be headed to. The team with the best odds is Florida State with the 14.3% chance. Considering Mike Norvell just turned down the Alabama job and got a fat with a PH contract extension, I don't think he's leaving Florida State. Florida, the Gators. This is where it gets interesting, because I think I've had throughout this discussion, there's been 3 or 4 jobs that I think Coach Prime would have left for. Texas A&M was one of them because he has roots in Texas. Does he want to return? That job opened. He didn't get it. So Texas A&M is out unless they open back up in 3 to 4 years, which we'll worry about down that when we get there, if we get there. Florida State was obviously another one. It's his alma mater. This was prior to Mike Norvell's extension. This was like Mike Norvell in the hot seat type of discussions. They obviously love Mike Norvell. He has that program in the perfect direction. Miami, Florida. Does he want to go to his alma mater, Florida State's rivals? I don't know. I don't know if that's something that he cares about. Does he still have Seminole pride? We don't know. Florida State's kind of spurned him. They kind of burned him. Does he kind of care about that tradition and pride, though? Like, would he be willing to go to his former school's biggest rival? But Florida has the second best odds. Billy Napier, I think, is a dead man walking out there in Gainesville. Florida's schedule is brutal. I think they play like 7 ranked teams to end the season. And I obviously, this isn't a Florida podcast, but they will probably have to fire Billy Napier, assuming if he wins these games, then he's going to save his job. But this is how Florida ends their season. So from October 12th on, they play at Tennessee, which is projected number 16 team, number 23 Kentucky, number 1 Georgia, at number 4 Texas, versus number 12 LSU, versus number 6 Ole Miss, and then at number 14 Florida State. Not to mention, they opened the season against number 24 Miami, and they also played number 25 Texas A&M. So in total, they played 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 ranked teams. And the 3 teams that they don't play that are ranked, Samford, which, I mean, no big deal. Mississippi State at Mississippi State, they could be a frisky team. And then UCF, frisky team, in-state rival. So Florida's it's gonna get a little tough for Billy Napier. Does Coach Prime want to go there? Does he want to deal with the challenges of being in the SEC? Does he want to deal with the pressure of being at a program like Florida, who it's kind of a fallen giant at this point? They aren't what they used to be. I don't think that would be the one I'd be worried about. That'd be, of all these jobs on this list I'm going to read to you, it'd be that one. Arkansas. That seems like a lateral move to me. Do you want to go to a program that their ceiling is being a middle of the pack in the SEC? No. Especially if you're at Colorado, you win the conference, you're in the playoff. If Coach Prime is serious about contending, he has an opportunity to contend right now at Colorado in the Big 12. And then Auburn, which they just hired Hugh Freeze like last year, so don't see it. Miami, interesting one. I think they'll have a bounce back year with Cam Ward, so I don't feel like that has any water to it. And then USC, don't think Lincoln Riley is going anywhere. I know USC fans are a little unhappy with how this past year went, but that wouldn't make sense to me. So those are the jobs. I think Florida is the only one that even makes the most remote sense. But again, Florida has a lot of pressure. And does he want to deal with that pressure? Does he want to deal with all the things that come with that job? I don't know. I feel like he's kind of repeatedly said that he likes Colorado. Now, granted, every coach likes where they're at, but I don't think Coach Prime's going anywhere, at least not for the meantime. When we come back, we're going to be talking about what Colorado needs to focus on this spring practice. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. We're talking about spring ball. We got some things to iron out. We got some things to work out. And these are my 3 big focuses for Colorado this spring ball. For one, I think we got to get this quarterback situation ironed out. Not the starting quarterback. We obviously know who that is. Deion Sanders, best quarterback in the country possibly. But who's going to be that guy behind him? I think Walter Taylor has a chance to kind of be like a wildcat quarterback, someone that they could use. Same thing with Destin Wade. I think they could use either of those guys in a situation where it's a run package, kind of help bolster the run game. However, I liked Ryan Staub against Utah. I thought he did well. Against Washington State, he didn't do well, but obviously he probably got like -10 reps against as they were preparing for the Cougars. So him and Gavin Cold were kind of thrown into the fire, and I don't think they were prepared to be in that moment. We also have to look at the running back room, getting them to full strength, figuring out the rotations, but also kind of keeping them healthy. Running back is their thinnest position, I would say, right now. It wouldn't shock me if Colorado went out there and landed a transfer portal running back. It wouldn't, just to add more depth to this room. Get the running back room right, get everyone right, kind of figure out the offense as a whole. Pat Shermer has kind of a tough task ahead of him. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, but he has to figure out a way to balance this offense. And then defensively, I know a lot of spring ball is not about hard hitting stuff. Like they're not going to be bruising people. They're not going to be giving people headaches. Shout out Deion Sanders. But let's improve the tackling. Let's improve the all around efforts on defense. Improve the kind of learning the scheme. Obviously, that's going to replace it. Learning the scheme. Robert Livingston comes in. He's got a whole new defense to operate. He's got a whole new defense of a whole new unit, of guys to learn who's the best at what, and tackling included. They need to figure out who's going to be their starting corners. They have a lot of position battles they need to figure out on defense. And I think Robert Livingston, as the defensive coordinator, needs to figure out what his move is. So that way this team can succeed and kind of focus in fall camp on just getting better rather than position battles. I think it was really hard last season that when we got into fall camp at Colorado, and it was like, so we actually only have 3 or 4 position battles set. Everyone else up for grabs. Like that was not great because you're not really preparing at that moment. It's like you're preparing in a sense, but you don't know who's doing what. And so I think if they could figure out who is the starters on defense, kind of figure out all of that, I think that would be a huge, huge advantage heading into the season compared to last year where it felt like they were still learning who could do what. So you guys comment below what you think they need to focus on in spring ball. We will discuss in the comments. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, give me 5 stars on Apple and Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. And I will tune in tomorrow. I hope you guys tune in tomorrow. I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great Wednesday. See you Thursday.